I'm your presenter for tonight. My name is Dixon Achimugumusa. I am a Christian, and I'm also a professional in the area of life sciences research. I'm a research scientist of several years. I hold a PhD in pharmacological biochemistry. My area of research includes drug discovery from biodiversity, molecular epidemiology, infectious disease research, and of course, biotechnology. Recently, I've been involved a lot with COVID-19 at policy level and also at research level. My research team was one of the first to carry out a seroprevalence study in this part of the world. When we did a seroprevalence study of the COVID-19 pandemic in Niger State in June 2020, this we presented and it has been acclaimed nationally and worldwide. Also, I am currently involved in a research for providing therapy for COVID-19 from our natural biodiversity. These are the things I've been doing in the area of coronavirus research. And I think it gives me the opportunity to be able to speak to this topic. So I'm going to share the screen so that we'll start right away. Our topic is COVID-19 mRNA vaccine, RFID chip, and the mark of the beast. As a way of introduction, excuse me, I'm just going to start right from the beginning so that we can all follow. Yes, in today's webinar, we'll discuss the introduction. We'll look at COVID-19, is it real or is it a hoax? We'll also look at the mRNA vaccine and see what it means. We'll look at the RFID chips and see how all these things ties into end time events. Then we'll discuss the mark of the beast. Now we know that the pandemic called COVID-19 has been with us since around March 2020, and it is one of the biggest public health issues in the last decades. However, there have been an unusually very fast response by the scientific community to develop vaccines for this disease, with the hope of returning the world back to normalcy, because the whole world went into lockdown and there was economic shutdown around the world. And the hope is that the vaccine, once the vaccines becomes implemented, the whole world will return back to normalcy. But there are controversies around the type of vaccine that have been developed and the speed with which the vaccines have been developed. And the controversies include the fact that people think the vaccine has the ability to implant a digital tracker on the vaccine recipients. We are going to look at all this and see how it ties down into the end time events. It suffices to say that COVID-19 is an abbreviation for coronavirus disease of 2019. It is a novel severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, also known as SARS-CoV-2. Coronavirus is actually a very large family of viruses, and it causes diseases ranging from common cold to severe diseases like the MERS and SARS. talking about the origin of SARS-CoV-2, which is the causative organism for the COVID-19 pandemic, it is believed that the virus passed from bats to an intermediate animal host, then it jumped into humans. There are about 7 known human coronaviruses. Remember, I told you that coronavirus is a large family of viruses. The ones that affect humans, there are about 7 of them known. 4 of them cause mainly asymptomatic or mild respiratory diseases, and they account for about 5 to 30% of all common colds. Then about 3 of them causes very severe diseases, and they include the SARS-CoV, MERS-CoV, and SARS-CoV-2. How did the SARS-CoV-2 originate? We have been told that it came from bats, then jumped into human. But we want to see how it relates to the other types of coronavirus before it. The SARS-CoV-2 that we are talking about today has about 50% genome identity with the MERS-CoV. It shares the same sequence identity. About 79% of the sequence is the same as the virus that caused SARS some years back. But it has 91% sequence identity with pangolin coronavirus and about 96% sequence identity with bat coronavirus. So you can see that it is actually more related to the bat coronavirus than any other human coronavirus. But the thing we have to note here is that the SARS-CoV-2 and SARS before it, they both have the same way of entering into the human body. They have the same cell of entry receptor, and this cell is called the angiotensin converting enzyme 2, or ACE2. So SARS and SARS-CoV-2 share the same mode of entry into our body. But it's also important that we note here that SARS is more virulent. It can cause much more disease than SARS-CoV-2. However, it is not easily as transmissible as SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 can be more easily transmissible than SARS before it. Like we said before, there are 3 documented highly pathogenic and lethal human coronavirus. The SARS coronavirus that we experienced between 2002 and 2003 had a mortality rate of about 9%, rising to about 50% in the elderly. MERS-CoV came around 2012, 2013, and it had a mortality rate of about 35%. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, its mortality rate is higher in people with existing conditions. People with no health condition, we've seen a mortality rate of about 0.9%, but it rises with people with different type of existing condition, and the most vulnerable are people with cardiovascular diseases existing before they had coronavirus infection. And we see mortality rate of about 11% in such people. One thing we should also note from here is that between 2002 and 2012, it's about 10 years. There was 10 years gap between emergence of 2 different types of coronavirus. But between 2012 and 2019, when the new virus came, it's about 7 years. And we see as the human population continues to increase, humans begin to live in areas that were not living before, and we begin to have interaction with things we were not having interaction with before. So this will lead to a rise in emerging and re-emerging disease. So we should not be shocked if in the next 5 to 7 years, another thing as deadly or of public health concern as SARS-CoV-2 emerges. Like we said before, the SARS is not as transmissible as SARS-CoV-2, even though it is more virulent. And we have what we call the mode of the transmission chain. There are about 6, but we can compress it into 3. That for transmission to occur, there must be an infectious agent like virus, bacteria, fungi, and so on. There must be a susceptible host like human beings, and there must be a conducive environment where the virus can move into the host. And all these things has to be present before an infection can take place. Now, having discussed all this, the question to ask now is COVID-19 real or is it a hoax? Is it a pandemic? Is it a scamdemic, as some people call it, or a plandemic, as some people call it? Why some believe that it is the most serious public health emergency the world has seen in the last decades? Some believe vehemently that no one has been able to isolate the virus from patients, and that COVID tests are nearly all false positives. In the book, Scamdemic, the COVID-19 Agenda, John Iovine stated that real pandemics don't rely on faulty prediction models, biased reporting, politicized science, exaggerated mortality rates, and inflected statistics for it to be called so. But that we have seen it with all these things he has pointed out, that we have seen it with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so for him, it has to be a scamdemic. Those that posit that it's a pandemic believe that the virus was engineered in a lab and was released into the society, and so that the virus is not a naturally occurring virus. These are the 3 positions. Some say it's a pandemic, others say it's a scamdemic, and some say it's plandemic. What is it really? From my position as a research scientist, I can tell you for sure that the virus is real and does exist. The virus makes real people sick with varying severity, from mild symptoms to very severe symptoms, leading to death in some cases. I have personally participated in carrying out antigen antibody rapid tests and polymerase chain reaction tests for coronavirus, and I can confirm confidently that the virus does exist. People I know personally have come down with the disease, and unfortunately, I've watched some of them die. However, I cannot argue against some of the doubts that have been raised by conspiracy theorists, such as politicized science, exaggerated mortality rates, inflated death statistics. Neither do I have the competence to categorically say that the virus is natural and not engineered. So we have to have this at the back of our mind as we go on. If the virus is real, as I've stated, why is there so much controversy? So much controversy. The World Health Organization has been at the center of the controversy, and it has been the target of the criticisms because it failed to exercise global health leadership at the start of the pandemic. The leadership of WHO was accused as being tool of Chinese politics, power, and propaganda. WHO failed to act on information it had from other sources apart from the Chinese government. It delayed warnings to other countries about the spread of the virus. And there have been a lot of flip-flops about the transmission of the virus from asymptomatic persons. Other international agencies such as CDC has also flip-flopped about the transmission mode. The mistrust of the Chinese authorities, politicized science, and a tyrannical and brutal shutdown of dissent by the big tech companies has led to a lot of the controversies that we have seen today. We are seeing controversy with the science of this disease. Ordinarily, science begins by asking questions and then seeking answers. It is therefore not surprising that one other major source of controversy trailing the COVID-19 pandemic is the attempt by the big tech companies such as Twitter, Facebook, Google, and the big pharmaceutical companies and the mainstream media to solely control how questions are asked and how answers are provided on this pandemic. They brutally shut down any dissenting opinion and dismissively label them as fake news or misinformation. In science, change in knowledge is inevitable because new observations may challenge prevailing theories, and the testing and improving and occasional discarding theories, whether new or old, go on all the time. Because this go on all the time, it is therefore necessary for us to be open-minded in science as to accept dissenting or different opinions. One of the things that they have tried to shut down is the fact that drugs that have been approved, previously approved, and have been in use for decades are now suddenly touted as dangerous just because some scientists have put them forward as possible treatment for COVID-19. This is in spite of numerous bodies of knowledge supporting the potentials of such drugs to alleviate the problem. Now, everybody is talking and pushing for vaccine and ensuring that nobody talks about drugs or cure for COVID-19. Why are the big pharmaceutical companies shutting down any other alternative scientific opinion about these pharmaceutical interventions? But we have a lot of body of knowledge on this, and I'm going to show some of them. In 2003, Lancet, one of the biggest publishing and the most respected publisher in the world, published effects of chloroquine on viral infection, an old drug against today's disease. This was in 2003, showing that chloroquine has antiviral activity. In 2005, another big giant in publishing industry, Virology Journal, published chloroquine as a potent inhibitor of SARS coronavirus infection and spread. You will say that, how can we be talking about this in 2005 when COVID-19 has not come into being? Remember, I told you that SARS was a problem between 2002 and 2003. And remember also, I told you that SARS and SARS-CoV-2 has the same mode of entry into our body. They both use what we call the ACE2. And this chloroquine has a way of inhibiting the virus from binding to this ACE2. So if it can stop SARS, why is it not stopping SARS-CoV-2, which also uses the same mode of entry? So it then gives reason to why it becomes controversial when they want to shut down the use of chloroquine for the treatment of coronavirus. We can go on and show other publications that have supported the use of chloroquine. And in fact, other compounds or other drugs like remdesivir, iopinavir, ritonavir, and so on. Also, zinc has been touted to be a potential inhibitor of coronavirus spread. And this has been published by well-respected publishing house like Elsevier. And another drug that has been touted is ivermectin. And in fact, some Nigerian publishers recently published that ivermectin shows clinical benefit in mild to moderate COVID-19, a randomized controlled double-blind dose response study in Lagos. So there are a lot of body of work to show that alternative drugs or drugs that have been used before can be repurposed to treat this disease. Also, the European Bioinformatics Institute on its Campbell website published that 6,900 compounds have been used against COVID-19, that's SARS-CoV-2, with 9,800 activities shown in 48 different assays and published in 8 documents. So there is a lot of convincing body of knowledge to show that other drugs should be given the same attention as we are giving to vaccine. But they are not giving these drugs attention. Instead, we are all talking about vaccine. So let us now go on to discuss the mRNA vaccine. But before we talk about the mRNA vaccines, let us talk about drugs generally and see what medicine does for the society. Medicines have existed in human society for as long as we have had disease itself. The goal of medicine is the elimination of disease or preservation of health. And this is achieved primarily by preventing disease. Prevention includes a wide range of activities aimed at reducing risk or threats to health. And experts have divided them into about 3 categories of prevention. We have the primary prevention, secondary prevention, and the tertiary prevention. We shall concern ourselves with primary preventions today. And examples of primary preventions include legislation and enforcement of ban to control the use of hazardous products, such as asbestos, or to mandate safe and healthy practices, such as use of nose masks, face masks, use of seat belts. It also includes education about healthy and safe habits, such as social and physical distancing. To tell people to maintain social and physical distancing is preventive medicine. Another example of primary prevention is immunization against infectious diseases. What is used for immunization? It is vaccines. A vaccine is a biological preparation that improves our immunity to a particular disease. Vaccines work by exposing our immune system to recognizable parts of a pathogen that we call antigen. Pathogens that cause disease, such as bacteria or virus. When the immune system recognizes these parts as a foreign body, it mounts a response against it. The response it mounts is that the immune cells, called B cells, will make antibodies to destroy the pathogen. Then sometimes the immune cells we call the T cell will be called into action to eliminate our own cells that have been infected with a pathogen. So B cells will destroy the pathogen, T cells will destroy our own cells that have been infected with the pathogen so that it does not spread to other cells. So some B and T cells will then remember that they have seen this antigen before. So when they see such antigen or such pathogen or such disease-causing organism in the nearest future, they have formed long-lasting memory cells so they can easily mobilize antibodies to deal with them so that it cannot cause clinical diseases in the future. There are several types of vaccines depending on the technology used for producing it. And traditionally, we have about 4 main types of vaccines. We have what we call the live attenuated vaccines that is made from the organism that causes the disease. The organism that causes the disease is made to lose its virulence, its ability to cause disease. Then it is now introduced as a vaccine. The body sees it as a foreign body, then produce memory cells against it, so that when the real disease comes later, it can be easily overwhelmed by our immune system. We also have what we call the inactivated vaccines, which is made up of either the virus or the bacteria that has been killed, inactivated, then introduced into the system so that the body will form memory cells against it, so that when it occurs later, it can be easily overwhelmed. We have other types like the toxoid vaccines and vaccines based on specific parts of the virus or bacteria. So much work has been done, however, to create new types of vaccine based on the genetic code of the virus or bacteria. And based on this, we have new types of vaccines we call the DNA vaccine, mRNA vaccine, and vector virus vaccines. And so this takes us to what we'll be discussing, which is the mRNA vaccine. The DNA vaccines are the DNA of the disease-causing organism is introduced into our system, and it causes our system to produce the recognizable parts of that virus or bacteria so that our body can mount an immune response against it. It's the same method for the mRNA vaccine. The mRNA vaccine is introduced into us, and it tricks our body into producing those parts. If it is a vectored virus vaccine, what it does is that they use a virus that does not cause disease in humans to introduce the pathogen that causes a particular disease, so that when it gets into our system can now recognize it and begin to mount response against it. For the vaccines for COVID-19 that have been produced so far, we have Sinopharm and Sinovac produced from China. And the technology used for producing it is the traditional technology, which is inactivated virus. They inactivated SARS-CoV-2 and produced the vaccine from it. However, Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccines is based on mRNA vaccines. One important difference we should also note is that the inactivated virus, or the traditional method of producing vaccine, produces vaccine that are not as effective as the new method. The mRNA vaccines are more specific than the traditional vaccine. So they have higher sensitivity and higher effectiveness than the traditional vaccine. So you expect the Moderna vaccines and BioNTech vaccines to be more effective than the Chinese vaccine. Also, the Sputnik 5 produced by Russia and the Oxford University and AstraZeneca vaccine are based on another new technology called the vector virus vaccine. In fact, AstraZeneca used adenovirus from chimpanzee and introduced the recognizable parts on COVID-19 into the adenovirus. Then the adenovirus is made to infect us so as to introduce the recognizable part, so that our body can begin to mount immune response against it. We should also note at this point that mRNA vaccine is not an entirely new vaccine technology. There's one vaccine based on mRNA that has been in clinical trials since 2011. There is no clear-cut scientific basis to show that mRNA vaccine can alter our genetic code, as is being alleged. However, if mRNA vaccine can trick our body into producing the spike proteins of COVID or SARS-CoV-2, that means a major source of worry is that it can also be engineered to trick our body into doing anything that may not have been disclosed to us. So that's the worry with this. People also allege that they want to use these mRNA vaccines to deliver microchips into our body so that they can use it to track us and control us eventually. So these are the challenges and concern with mRNA vaccines. So it takes us to another important topic that we'll be discussing on tonight, which is the RFID chip. RFID stands for radio frequency identification. It's a wireless technology capable of automatic and unambiguous identification by extracting a unique identifier from a microelectronic tag attached to an object, in this case to be humans, which can be read. The RFID system consists of various components which are integrated in a manner that enables communication between the object where the tag has been implanted and the reader that will be reading it. The RFID technology is used for three purposes mainly: for tracking, for inventory management, and for validation. However, it has capability of, it can offer healthcare practitioner advantages to enhance clinical practice. It is believed by experts that RFID technology for medical purpose has the potential for life-saving solution. I'm sure you've heard of situations several times. Somebody will go to the clinic, meet a doctor, has a health issue, and cannot explain what the health issue is. You've heard people saying things like, my body is doing me somehow. The doctor is supposed to interpret what my body is doing me somehow means and provide your medical solution for you. Imagine a situation where you go into a hospital and you do not even need to say anything because there's an implant in you which can diagnose you and give information to the doctor, and the doctor can provide seamless treatment. Or where in a situation of emergency, somebody was brought to the hospital and cannot talk, but the person has an implant that can diagnose what is wrong. That can provide information to the healthcare practitioner to be able to treat the person seamlessly without any complication. For instance, Mrs. Leah McMullan suffers from a chronic nerve disorder caused by a medical accident in 2009, and she relies on an implanted spinal cord stimulator to manage her pain. She said she would have committed suicide if this technology was not there for her to be able to manage this severe pain. Nerve stimulators are among the many implantable technologies that have leapt into the health market in full force. Insertable cardiac monitors become reliable options for patients with chronic heart conditions. Recently, the FDA of US has approved the first ever long-term implantable continuous glucose monitoring system for people with diabetes. It is hoped that people will soon consider storing their medical information on encrypted RFID chips. We have actually been using RFID a lot, but our problem has been with its implantation. You carry your ATM card about. It contains an RFID chip. Your phone has a GPS. Your phone can track you. Those are RFID enabled equipment that we carry with us. So it is not a new technology. What we are actually fighting is the implantation, not the technology itself, because we have been using this technology seamlessly. But even though there are some benefits to RFID chips, it has some barriers to its implementation. It is very, very expensive, so it's not for everybody. There are also technological limitations to its implementation as at now. There are risks of developing cancer when you implant this chip. Then there is a risk of privacy security risk, and also risk to human freedom and autonomy that it can be used by government to track, monitor, and control us. So these are things that we consider as impediments or barriers to implementation of this technology. But this technology is already with us. We use it on our ATM cards. We use it on our phones. But what we are fighting against, or what we don't want, is the implant into our body, because we fear that that will become the mark of the beast. So let's go to discussing the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is what we see from Revelations chapter 13, from verse 11 to 18. Verse 11 said, "Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon." Verse 16, "He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. In Revelation chapter 14, verse 9 to 11, we see again, "Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worships the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name." From these two passages, we have seen that the mark of the beast is given by the second beast. There are actually three beasts in Revelation. The second beast, which is also known in some places as the false prophet, is the one that will institute the mark of the beast under the direction of the Antichrist. And it will be a mark on the forehead or on the right hand. And you can see clearly that this mark is associated with the worship of the beast. Associated with the worship of the beast. it is not a mark that you can take unknowingly. It is a mark that is associated with the worship of the beast. Now, a lot of the controversy about the mark of the beast come from a shift in theology. Growing up, we have been made to understand the timeline of the end time events to be that there will be a rapture before the tribulation. And if there is a rapture before the tribulation, the Church of Christ will have been raptured before the mark of the beast is implemented. And so there's no need for us to begin to worry about the mark of the beast because we'll have gone anyway by that time. So what we should worry ourselves about will be to make ourselves rapturable. But there's a shift now, and people are beginning to say that there is no pre-tribulation rapture, that in fact, all the saints of Christ will pass through the tribulation. And if they will pass through the tribulation, it means that it is very, very essential that we recognize the mark of the beast. So is COVID-19 vaccine the mark of the beast? Kanye West was alleged to have said that, I quote, it is so many of our children that are being vaccinated and paralyzed. So when they say that the way we are going to fix COVID is with a vaccine, I am extremely cautious. They are going to come up with a vaccine and everybody is going to have to take it. And inside of that vaccine, there's going to be some type of electronic computer. Sorry, I want to admit somebody in. Electronic computer device, some type of chip in us, and that's the mark of the beast. They want to put chips inside of us. They want to do all kinds of things to make it where we can't cross the gates of heaven. When I say they, that's the humans that have the devil inside them. And the saddest thing is that we all won't make it to heaven. And there will be some of us that do not make it. This is allegedly a quote by Kanye West about the COVID vaccine, that they are going to introduce chips into us, and that will be the mark of the beast. And once we have taken it, we are already marked for hell forever. And so there's no more salvation for us. But is COVID vaccine or the chip actually the mark of the beast? Let's look at Revelation chapter 7, verse 3 to 4. It saying, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000. All of the tribes of children of Israel were sealed. In Revelation chapter 14, verse 1, it said, then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. Now we see that in Revelation, there are two types of markings on the forehead. The one of the beast and the one of the lamb. How do we think they are going to do the marking of the lamb? Are they going to introduce some kind of chip too? Or do we think that the mark of the beast is actually symbolic? For instance, if we go back to look at Revelation chapter 13, verse 11, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. If you read to verse 15, it described the beast. It described it as an animal. Do we believe that the beast is actually an animal or is symbolic of the system that is going to be in place. If the beast is not actually a two-horned animal, why do we believe that the mark of the beast must actually be something that is visible or something that can be placed on one's forehead or the hand, and it's not symbolic, just like the beast itself? There are some questions I want to ask as we look at these things together so that we arrive at conclusions by ourselves. Now, according to Kanye West, allegedly, if we take the COVID vaccine, we'll be marked for hell forever. Now, will God leave salvation to a game of chance? Because nobody really knows as at now. What is the essence of the blood of Christ, therefore? If blood of Jesus Christ can no longer give us salvation, what did Jesus Christ die on the cross for us for? The blood of Christ can no longer save us if we take the vaccine. We will now be damned to hell forever. Let's think about this. Now, not taking the vaccine is akin to what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did by not worshiping the image of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 3, verse 8 to 16, if actually the vaccine is the mark of the beast. But did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do it on their own without the grace of God? Is that what we actually think, that they just decided that militarily they are not going to take, they are not going to bow down to the image of Nebuchadnezzar? If we remember, this did not start with these children on that day. These were the same children that said that they were not going to defile themselves with the food of Babylon, right from chapter 1 of Daniel. So these are people that have decided long ago. So I believe that taking the mark of the beast is a conscious decision we are going to make. It's not something that will be left to chance, because the mark of the beast is saying that you agree with the beast and you are going to worship the beast. So it's not something that someone can take by mistake. Again, some questions that I want to put forward. Doesn't the Lord know how to rescue his own again? If we read 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 3, has that scripture been validated? That will be so afraid of the mark of the beast? Has Nahum chapter 1, verse 7 been invalidated? Is the Lord no longer a stronghold in the day of trouble? Didn't the Lord promise to keep us, and none of us will be lost except the son of perdition, according to John 17, chapter 12? John chapter 17, verse 12. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 10, the Bible says, because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. So we have been afraid of technology for so long. But the fact is that technology is neutral. It is what we use it for that it can be evil or good. If the Antichrist is coming to if the Antichrist was to come in 1970, it had enough technology for it to devise to control the world. If the Antichrist is to come today, it has enough technology. But it doesn't mean technology itself is inherently evil. Technology is neutral. It can be used by the Antichrist. It can be used by Christians for the propagation of the gospel. Electricity was described as evil initially by Christians. They say people were trying to play God because it's only God that can provide light. And so people were trying to play God. And so electricity is of the devil. Christians fought it initially, but we are all enjoying electricity today. In Sweden, preachers said that the phone was the instrument of the devil when it came into being initially. We remember calling the television the devil's box, and now there are a lot of evangelists on the television preaching the gospel of Christ. Talking about the internet was also called the devil's network. But we are able to have this program today because of the internet. So technology is neutral. It can be used for something good. It can be used for something bad. But there has been a desperate search for the mark of the beast. In fact, if you ask Christians in the first century, they will be shocked that the world has not ended by now, because they will be sure that they were at the end of the world at their time. In fact, at the point Nero was touted, Caesar Nero was touted to be the beast, because if his name is transcribed into Greek and then into Hebrew and given numbers, it amounts to the number 666. And people say Nero was the beast. And Nero did persecute the church. He did a lot of things. In fact, he ticked a lot of boxes about the beast. But he was not the Antichrist at that time. People came and said that Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist at a point, because he had 3 names: Ronald, Wilson, Reagan. Each of the names had 6 letters. And so there's a Ronald 6, Wilson 6, Reagan 6. People say Ronald Reagan was the beast. And they try to justify it. People that use body tattoo, they say, okay, oh, this is how the devil was going to mark his soul, that tattoo is the mark of the beast, and so on. Barcodes, when barcodes came, people avowed, Christians, that there was 666 in barcode, that people should not use anything that contains barcode. But we've been using barcode for years now. In fact, it's part of our daily life. If you go to shop to buy anything now, they use barcode to count what you have bought, so that we will be able to pay. When chips began to be used on a wide scale on our credit card, on our debit card, and we went into cashless economy, people will say, oh, the Antichrist has come, that the Antichrist was going to use the cashless economy. Then when cryptocurrency came, they said, oh, that is going to be the currency of Antichrist. So there have been a desperate search for the mark of the beast. There have been a desperate search for the mark of the beast. But is that what we should concern ourselves with as Christians? I believe as Christians, we should concern ourselves with how to live a righteous life, how to be ready for Christ, how to be decided for him. If we do this, God is able to keep his own, to keep us, and to keep us from the end of time. Thank you for listening. God bless you. We'll be taking questions, observations, comments from now. Thank you very, very much. So if you have any question, you can either write it in the chat room, or you can unmute yourself and give your questions, or you state your observations, or anything that I've said that you do not agree with. let us discuss it. And that is the essence of this program tonight.